Can you hear me? Okay. Good morning and good afternoon, depends on where you are. So welcome to the webinar, Nevermind, the research piece, communicating in policy environments, hosted by CIPPEC and Politics and Ideas with the support of GDNet. Can you also see me? Great. We are very glad to have you on board this webinar. It is our first experience organizing this event, so we hope everything goes well. Here with me there is Natalia Aquilino, who is the director of the Influence Monitoring and Evaluation Program of CIPPEC. I am the coordinator of the same program, and I will be the facilitator during the next 1 hour and a half. So we are also with Chelsea Meacham from New York University, who will help with notes. Okay, so we are the team today at CIPPEC. Before explaining how the webinar will work, I would like to introduce, or just to present, our speakers today. Vanesa Weyrauch from Politics and Ideas and CIPPEC in Argentina. Rebecca Pointer from the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies in South Africa, and René Hernández from the Salvadoran Foundation for Economic and Social Development in El Salvador. Please, guys, just say hello to the chat. Great, great. Many thanks to the three of you. I will further introduce you at the time of your presentations. So, okay, I will now explain some rules for the webinar. First of all, I hope you all have the opportunity to read the concept note, which would be very helpful at the time of presentation. It will make your approach to presentations easier. So in case you couldn't do it, I invite you to read it just after the webinar. Okay, I just want to say that the participants will have the possibility to communicate through the chat. We all know that speaking or having the possibility to talk is much warmer, but I need to apologize because enabling and disabling the sound, the audio takes a lot of time. So we prefer to invest that time. Okay, I will try to speak louder. Just tell me if you can hear me well, right? Shahira from GDNet says, asking to speak louder. I will do that effort, but please tell me if you can do it, if you can hear me, okay? Okay, great. So, okay, just apologize because you won't be able to speak today. You will communicate through the chat. Thanks. Okay, remember you have the option the possibility to set your language. Top right, you will see the possibility to change it to English, Spanish, according to your place. Okay, remember that if you have problems with internet connection, unfortunately we can't do anything or that much about that. It's something that may take place. We are a lot of people. We were, by the time of application, we were almost 35 people. I don't know if everyone's on board now. I hope yes. So problems with internet connection may take place. I will recommend you, in case it happens, to log out and log in again. That's the only thing we can do by the moment in order to solve it. Anyway, we are recording this and we'll try to share it with you after the webinar. We just need to find out the best way. Maybe we will upload it to YouTube, or we will find another alternative. So don't worry if you miss any part. We will have it. We are recording it. Okay, one important moment will take place after presentations. We will open a round of questions and answers, and we will do it in the following way. Every participant, okay, I'm reading a question. Will the participants receive the presentations via email, or are we going to be able to download them? Okay, Nicola, don't worry, because you will see presentations in the screen. You will see it very well, and you won't have problems with that. Okay, so presentations will be at your screen. Each speaker will have a couple of minutes to present their reflections and thoughts, and once after that, you will have the possibility. Okay, we will send the presentations back after the webinar. Yeah? But during the webinar, you will see them in the screen. So you will have the possibility to send questions after presentations. At the right moment, I will ask you to send it in an organized way through the chat. I will ask you to clarify who should be the person or the speaker who you want to be the person who answers the question, so I can direct the question well. Okay, so please do not send any questions before the presentations are finished, right? Just take note and remember it for the right moment. Okay, everyone. Okay, Natalia, she let me know that we are tweeting through our Twitter account. I invite you all to follow us at I'm writing the name of the account to the chat. So I invite you to follow us there. Okay, so these are our few rules. We hope that everyone has understood them. If not, please, I just give you 2 minutes before we start the presentation to do any questions to the chat. Okay. Right now we are 24 participants. I see people log in and log out at every moment. So now we are 24 participants. So I hope we can have a good time and we can learn from Vanesa, Rebecca, and René reflections and experiences. So now I would like to start with presentations. I will introduce first Vanesa Weyrauch. Okay, I'm enabling her audio and video.
Hello, everyone. Hope you hear me well.
Maybe, Vanessa, you can speak a little bit louder.
Yes. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Nice to be here with you.
Great. Let's see if everyone can hear you well. I see a couple of colleagues typing. Okay. Okay. Some of us can hear you well. Some of us have a little bit of problems. Okay. Everything we can do now is ask Vanessa to speak a little bit louder.
Okay, may I start now?
Okay, just let me introduce you with a couple of words. Okay, just a brief introduction. Vanesa Weyrauch is the co-founder of Politics and Ideas and associate researcher of CIPPEC. She has experience in capacity building, technical assistance, and research production on think tanks, research communications, and planning, monitoring, and evaluating policy influence. She has worked with organizations in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. So after this brief introduction, please, Vanessa, start with your presentation. Remember, guys, to take notes, and then after the presentations, we have the possibility to send them to the chat, and we will ask Vanessa, René, and Rebecca to answer them. Thanks.
Thank you. So again, hello to everyone. Thanks for being here. We have decided jointly with CIPPEC and Politics and Ideas to create this brief space to share some recent reflections we've been having around how do we communicate research within policy. And mainly, as you can see in the presentation, we have a question here, and we would like to start co-answering this question with you. So even though participation is not as will not be as fluent as if we were in a face-to-face event, I do hope we have a chance to get your comments and answers on what we share. We have also invited two colleague organizations, as Leandro mentioned, and because we really believe in the value of debating and thinking together about these issues. So the question here and my proposal is to start thinking whether there is room and need to build a new or an alternative, or I would say more like a complementary paradigm in the way we are currently communicating research to influence, inform, or we can talk about it, what do we want to achieve within policy. And why we're using within policy, because the idea is to start emphasizing the environment that surrounds this type of work. We are, I think most of us here are aware on how communications has grown within the policy and research field in terms of tools, activities, strategies, and also a lot of capacity development activities that are currently taking place, ranging from getting engaged in developing social media strategies to data visualization or being trained on how to deal with media. And this is really great, and it's an increasing field, and we're happy to see it, and we've been part of that. We've been developing trainings on diverse ways of communicating, but we also need to understand the reason why this has increased, and I think that one of the main reasons is that there has been an increasing demand and interest in learning how to better link research with policies, right? Many of our organizations produce valuable knowledge, and we want to learn and to improve the way that knowledge becomes part of the public policy dialogue and decision making. And the assumption has been for the past years, and that's why so many efforts have been going around, the assumption is that communications plays or can play a very important role in building this, what has been called a bridge, and what some people question whether we should talk about a real bridge. But the idea in many of the capacity development activities has been that the starting point is the research and knowledge we produce, and that communications will help us as like the main or one of the main venues to make that of use and value for the society within public policies. And in this sense, we shared a metaphor in the conceptual paper, a metaphor that presents the knowledge as wine that the researcher produces, and communications and other tools being a way of serving that wine. And the idea today is going a little bit further and thinking about the party to which we will bring that wine, which is the public policies party, if we can think about it in that way for a while, and what happens there. So far we've been placing a lot of effort and research and capacity building within or focusing on the research, on point A, right? That means that we've been making ourselves questions such as, why do policymakers ignore or pay attention to the knowledge we produce? And so we ask, like, when should we prepare to deliver that evidence? What type of stories we should tell that will resonate with policymakers? What are the best channels? And there's a lot of efforts in improving those channels and innovating in terms of how we communicate, the same with the format we give to the communications, and how can we measure the impact of communications. And these are all really valuable and very useful questions, and if we're finding out answers for them, that means we're going on the right direction. But today we want to complement those efforts with proposing to look deeper at the policy processes, or at the public policy processes. That doesn't mean that we haven't been thinking about them, of course, that since our work has to do with public policies, we usually have methods to scan out the context and make decisions on how to move within that context. But I think there's room within communications practices to deepen a little bit that use and analysis of the context in terms of how we communicate. So this would mean, and these are just some questions, so I'll go deeper into those questions, having or complementing the prior questions with this new type of questions. For example, which are the written and unwritten principles and practices that guide policymaking in our country? We may know them, we may know some of them, but are we really taking them into account when we think and when we are devising specific communications tools and activities? Do we really ask ourselves at the project level, in our program, or within the organization, what specifically means influencing or informing policy in this moment? And is really communications linked to that way of thinking about influence and informing? Do we agree? Does it vary according, or should it vary according to projects, or even the moment or period or stage of evolution of a program or of an organization on the whole? which are the players that usually take part of that conversation? Are we really speaking constantly with them? Do we know how they speak to each other and how do they relate to each other? And does our communications take into account those relationships? Do we establish these ongoing and permanent working relationships with these players? Are we talking about players, or do we see them as players, or are they just passive publics and audiences which will receive our messages? Another interesting question, and we are going to talk a little bit about this too, is when and under what circumstances do changes in policy usually happen? To understand those moments, to understand those ways in which changes take place, and do we build communications thinking about those milestones, or those habits, or those usual forms in which policy can or cannot change in our setting? And also, how can we improve the way we communicate and better assess our work, how we learn about how we communicate? So what may happen if we start at B? Here, I'm not saying that we should take one way or the other. We've been working, I think I've seen a lot of efforts in this field in the column, in the first column, the left-hand column, the research-centered one, where we have been improving the way our communications is relevant, it's timely, our research is more accessible to different stakeholders. We have been developing new formats and ways of communications, and also finding ways to better craft our key messages and detect which are the key messages that emerge from research. And this is a really good effort, which I think would be complemented with some more work and more focus on centering on the context. That means, as I have said before, knowing very well which are the guiding principles of policymaking, understanding what influence it could really look like within this effort, developing and working relationships and engagement strategies, not only with policymakers, but other actors as well, and really taking into account that we are just one in that process and in that field, identifying the right circumstances for change to happen, and also being aware on how people are talking about the problems, how problems are being framed, how solutions are being discussed. So the idea would be, and my question would be, what would happen whenever we are devising a communications plan or a strategy or even a specific tool, if we started from the context, if we started looking into these principles, having some answers, having some ideas, and then turning into the specific activities and strategies and tools and enhancing their relevance, timeliness, access, format, and his messages, but with those reflections about context taking place systematically before making decisions in a more specific way. So let's see a little bit more about what this would mean, or what following this type of principles which emerge from centering in the context imply. I will take one of those. One is, as I had mentioned before, is really identifying which would be the right circumstances for change to happen. I mean, is it enough to turn our main research findings or conclusions into a policy brief? Or should we also start and complement and think about how that policy brief should take place, and how should we communicate and also even produce it if we think about the circumstances of change to happen? One idea or one way, or a practical way for identifying those circumstances for change to enable change has to do with, do we have an idea, do we have a theory? Yes, this is related to the theory of change. Do we have an idea on how do we think that policy change will happen in that specific field or moment in which we are working? And in this sense, we will send this paper where I'm taking this idea from, which is from Weyrauch. She has systematized 10 main theories that have been developed in social sciences around policy change. Yes, ranging from Kingdom's policy windows theory to the regime theory from other authors. So I won't have time to share each of them. I'll just pick one of them to see how that affects communication, and I will send, we will share this paper, which I think is very enlightening in terms of device communication strategy. So one of these theories is what is called the power elites theory, which thinks that main decisions are taken in a very circumscribed group, and there are certain stakeholders that do have the power and that interact with each other in terms of making change and making decisions. So if we think that at this stage of the public policy in our, say we are talking about education, we are thinking about education reform, which is really in this stage of the discussion going to be decided in a very small group, then we will probably need not to spend a lot of time in communicating our ideas through media. We will instead think about other strategies which are more aligned with the way we think decisions will be made. For example, doing direct advocacy to those key decision makers or the people, the few people that influence in these policymakers when the real policy opportunities emerge. And the other one would be to not only to advocate and try to talk with them, but also develop ongoing relationships with this same group. And in this sense, what we would expect, and I will analyze this in the next point, which is like, what is the concrete type of outcome that we can have, right? Or what are the type of influence that we can have? In this way, we would say, okay, we will be doing good in terms of communication if communications has helped us increase the strategic alliances with important partners to reach these policymakers and influentials. Or we have also seen increased action by important partners. Another way, another point, or another principle that would follow from taking the adventure of starting to think before about the context and moving from there to making more concrete and practical communications decisions would be, as I was saying before, to really understand and agree what influencing would really look like at this moment. We know that there are a lot of policy dialogues going on around the issue, the policy issue, problem, or potential solutions that we are working on simultaneously, with many actors speaking at the same time from different angles, guided by different principles and values and moments. So, and not only that, but we also know, as you may see in the graph with the circles, that evidence is only a small part of that dialogue. There are a lot of other factors, and we need to understand them to really craft a good communication strategy. Policymakers do not only take evidence into account and sometimes they don't take it into account at all, but we want evidence to play a role there. So how can we enable evidence to have a role there? We need to take into account other factors, such as the resources that are available for the policymaker to make a change or to make a reform or to really start thinking about a new policy problem that we have detected and we want them to pay attention. They have values that influence the way they frame this problem or the type of solutions they're willing to take into account or not. There are a lot of lobbyists and pressure groups that are also talking to them. So how, I mean, we know this in theory, but do we really find, or do we really take the specific values that are in place within this policy discussion? Do we really understand what is the usual way that policymakers or influentials discuss and take decisions about this policy problem or issue? What are their habits? What's the tradition here? And how then that can really make us recalibrate, refocus the communications effort, and also shape and fine-tune the format, the timing, the messages that we will decide to share. And in this sense, I think we can move forward, and many of you are surely familiar with this way Lindquist has proposed to understand policy influence. We're not talking only about directly affecting policy regimes and decisions. I mean, most of us want to have those stories, and sometimes we do have a story where the research findings have directly influenced or contributed to the development of a certain law, to a modification of an existing public program, or to the redesign of a governmental structure. But this is not what happens more frequently, we all know, and should not be the only aim of our policy engagement and communications efforts. We need to think about other ways and to be very specific within communications and thinking, are we really trying to do this, or are we trying to percolate some policy ideas into the discussion, into the debate, into the way policymakers understand an issue that would be broadening their policy horizons? Or will communications help develop policy capacity? Are we going to help decision makers, or the key ones, or their main advisors become better skilled and equipped to understand or to deal with a specific policy problem? So of course the communications activities and actions will vary according to the way we are framing this type of contribution that we want to make with our research policy. And another way would be to think about, are we aiming more at making changes at the discursive level? So we want people to talk differently about this problem, or do we really want to achieve some behavioral changes, and we want to convince, for instance, local policymakers to open up some space for policy discussion with local civil society organizations in terms of, for example, how they are planning strategically their work for their municipality or local jurisdiction. So, of course, communications efforts will also vary according to this type of changes that we are trying to produce, and if we start from there, we will be able to better decide on how to move on with specific activities and tools. So these are just some ideas, as you have seen in the column about context, and think I will go back this complementing our questions when we focus on what we have in research with our analysis and decisions about context. There are a lot of things that I think would probably change and help us move forward in terms of how communications can contribute to research interacting with policy. And that means not only talking to policy, yes, in the metaphor, but also listening to policy. So these are some of the main ideas, and I'd really like now, and I will turn to my colleagues to see how this resonates with them, and I'm really eager to your comments and the questions at the end of the session. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Leandro.
Okay, great. Thanks, Vanessa, for your enlightening presentation. I'm sure our colleagues have a lot of questions for you. Please remember to take notes, and after the following two presentations, we will open the space for questions and answers. Before presenting Rebecca, I would like to say thanks to you who have started following us through Twitter, and I want to say special thanks to those participants who are sharing computers, because I know that implies more effort in terms of audio. I know people is sharing computers at GDNet in Egypt, 3IE in India, IDRC in Canada, Think Tank Fund. So thanks everyone. Moreover, for your information, we have participants from South Africa, the UK, Bolivia, Laos, USA, Netherlands, Colombia, Guatemala, Bangladesh, Kosovo, Serbia, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Canada, and El Salvador. So we are very glad to have you on board now. So, okay, now it is Rebecca's turn. I will put your presentation. Just a minute, please, before I can introduce Rebecca. Okay. So please, Rebecca, tell us when you are okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can everyone hear Rebecca? I can hear you.
Great.
Great. So just let me introduce you
I'm just
very
going to
briefly.
change my position
Sorry?
because I see that the light is affecting the image. I'm just changing position. There we go.
I think you're okay. So please speak
Okay.
the louder you can.
Hello?
Okay, so Rebecca Pointer has 20 years of experience in NGOs and research communication across several sectors, including adult education, municipal service, health, equity, and food systems. She's currently completing her master's in political communication while working as the information and communications officer at the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies in South Africa. Her work includes communication strategies, publications management, writing and editing, website content administration, social media, and IT support. So, Rebecca, please go ahead now.
Well, hello, everybody. I want to talk today about how politics is affecting our engagement in the policy terrain. At the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies, we focused on the relationships between poverty and food systems, and particularly the impact of land rights and agriculture on bringing about social change. We're actually most well known for our policy engagement on land reform. And land reform is a very political issue in South Africa because it comes from a history, the apartheid history, determined who has land in South Africa. So in engaging with policy at PLAAS, our understanding about what is policy shapes how we go about doing our policy engagement. And the key thing is that policy has an overarching ideology. In South Africa, there's different ideologies competing with each other. The neoliberal ideology dominates at the moment, but there's also various racial ideologies that have a lot of impact on how land reform happens. So policy is about the overarching ideology as well as the written statements of intent, the policy documents, the laws, the court judgments. And at the same time, policy is also about the practices of delivery. So when it comes to land reform delivery, on the one hand, the policies might say one thing, but when it comes to delivery, we see totally different practices happening. We very much see that policy is being created by a kind of web of power. And the web of power includes various units or groups, from ministers and ministries, regional bodies, international organizations, business, civil servants, unions, journalists, academics, citizens, political activists, NGOs, and political parties. And these groups may be, some of them may be pulling in the same direction, but some of them are in different directions. And so depending on how, which directions the policy gets pulled in, we'll see a different shape to that policy. And also at different times, different groups will have different amounts of power within the policy-making terrain. So at one point, business might have a strong voice and be leading the determination of what the policy outcome is. But at another point, civil society may, for example, through activist engagement, say no and stand up and say no, and that will then shift the policy terrain. So these are very much the dynamics that influence land reform policy in South Africa. In South Africa at the moment, we've got a political climate where the government is led by the African National Congress. Now, the African National Congress was the liberation political party. That's the party that Nelson Mandela headed. They've been in government for 20 years, characterized by a limited transformation. There's not much economic change. Economically, white people still hold most of the economic goods of South Africa. And in terms of the geography of South Africa, under apartheid, racial groups were moved into separate areas. And the geography of South Africa today is still very much the same as it was 20 years ago. There is some integration happening, but it's at a very low level. So in that 20 years of democracy, we have also seen an increasing inequality, with the poor becoming poorer and the rich becoming richer. And although we have seen the emergence of a new black elite, and this new black elite is often super rich, while the ordinary citizen is a poor person who is black.
Okay, so we're having some problems with Rebecca's connection. I will just turn off her camera. Okay, let's wait a minute to see if she comes back. Okay, colleagues, let's wait for Rebecca to come back. Log out and log in. Apologize for this inconvenience. It can, okay, you are exposed to it. So in case she can't come back, we will start with René. We will try to end her presentation later. Remember, please, to take notes. After René's presentation, we will start with questions and answers. Okay. Okay, I think she's back now. Please, Rebecca, say something to see if we can hear you. Rebecca, are you there? Great. I think we can.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes. What I did is turn your camera off. Yes.
Okay.
In order to avoid some problems with connection. So we will only hear you now. That's okay? Your camera off.
Okay.
Okay, so please go ahead and apologize, everyone. So we will. That's okay?
Can you hear me?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay, I don't know where you cut off. As I was saying, since the 20 years since the end of apartheid, we've seen increasing inequality and the emergence of a new super rich black elite. In this context, while the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, we've seen an increase in service delivery protests and an increase in state violence with police killing a number of protests. At the same time, we've seen increasing government corruption with the president spending millions on his own house while people don't have access to services. And in this context, we're about to face a general election in May. At the same time, we've seen the emergence of a new pro-poor political party to the left of the ANC called the Economic Freedom Front. And this new political party has put land reform at the front and center of its political campaign because it argues that land reform is not happening quickly enough. So the land reform terrain is determined by both the history and the policy since 1994. There's a history of dispossession of indigenous populations. There's been mass relocation of indigenous populations from the colonial times up until the end of apartheid, huge government subsidies for white farmers until the mid-1980s, and 87% of the land was white-owned. From 1994, property rights were enshrined in the Constitution. This means that people who owned land in 1994 had the right to hold onto that land, although the land reform legislation said that they would redistribute.
Okay, Rebecca, are you there?
30% of
Okay, we're having problems with Rebecca's voice. It goes out. So I will recommend that we continue with René, and then try to come back with Rebecca. So everyone, in case we cannot do it later, we will send her presentation. It's a pity, but we need to continue. Okay, so let's continue with René. Okay, so please, René, say something.
Good morning.
Okay, I think we can hear you and see you well. If not, please, any participant, tell us to the chat if you have any difficulty. So, great, René. Just a few words about you. Since 2009, René has been the communications director of the Salvadoran Foundation for Economic and Social Development in El Salvador. He holds a BA in Communications with a specialization in Strategic Communications and Public Relations, and he's currently completing his master's in Image Counseling and Policy Consultancy. Before FUSADES, he worked as a consultant in strategic communications for multinational and local companies, as well as government institutions and political parties. So, please, René, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Leandro. Can you hear me well? Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. I just wanted to talk to you this morning about public policy impact and what do our think tanks really want from our work and our influence. And it's really becoming relevant and transcendent. What does becoming relevant mean? It means being connected with the matter at hand and being pertinent. And also transcendent is going beyond ordinary limits, surpassing, exceeding your own expectations. Because think tanks are usually the institutions most connected with important issues, economic, social, and political problems. But in an era filled with so many options in communications and media through technology, we have to be very, very strategic, because a think tank that does not communicate properly just ceases to exist. And also, job as communicators, also in think tanks, is not only to promote issues and research, but also to strengthen credibility and reputation. And I was thinking this a couple of days ago, how to approach this communications issue with my colleagues, and how to impress them. But also, what I thought is, hey, let's go back to basics. In an era that's so quickly changing, even daily, when media is everywhere, and our audiences are becoming more sophisticated with their usage of media, we have to do a checklist of what we have within our think tanks to communicate. So I wanted to talk to you this morning about the source, the message, what media we're using, and what audiences are we talking to, and if we know them. It's very important before we start that before every communications effort, you have to have a very clear communications objective. What do you want to achieve? What do you want communications to achieve? And what changes do you expect? If we don't have a clear communications objective, we're always there. If we don't have goals, we're never achieving them. So it's very clear, it's very important that before we start anything, we have to have a clear objective of what we want. What action are we calling to? So let's start with the source. Who are the source? It's the researchers. At FUSADES, we have always encouraged our spokespersons to be the same researchers that are writing every piece. So what we have to encourage them also is to have the right attitude and approach and importance to communications at the institutional level and at the research level. We have at least 24 spokespersons at our think tank, and each one we're trying to position them as opinion leaders and as authorities in issues that they're studying. Most of all within the media, so they are referenced to them anytime they need. But the key issue is that they have to assume this role, not only to engage and write, but they have to be aware that whatever they are producing, they are going to have to sell, and they are going to have to be relevant. And not all audiences speak the same technical language that they do. So we really encourage them to become communicators, not only researchers, but they're going to be the one promoting these their own work. We have researchers now that are tweeters, that they're street stars. They write blogs. You understand that they also have a key role at the time of selling these kind of their own work. And another key issue about the source is that strategic treatment of issues and topics has to be at conception, not at birth. Most of the time, or when I first started at FUSADES, it was a common practice that researchers did their work, and when it came to communications, the baby was delivered, and they just say, communicate this. And it's very hard. It's too hard. So what we do now is, when we're there at conception, when the idea of what issues are going to be treated and how they're going to be approached, we are with them. We are working hand in hand with the researchers, because at the end, it's going to have to be communicated, and it's going to have to be communicated by them, and we have to ask a whole bunch of questions that they're going to have to answer. So we have to bring strategic treatment of communications at conception, not at birth. Also, it's very important that you have that think tanks have a lot of options about public policy packaging, not only a book or a presentation, but today audiences are far more sophisticated, and we want to, if we're not relevant, if we don't really get their attention, we're just gonna be passed through. You know, people now do not read left to right like in a book. They read interconnected. So we have to be more aware what our audiences are, how our audiences are consuming the media. Also, we have to have a plan of how to build these abilities and strengthen the performance of our own spokespersons. I mean, most of them are economists. They're social policy. Social professionals. They are lawyers, and communications is not their strength, but we can build these abilities, and through training, once we have their attitude, you know, in the right place, they can really become really good communicators. And there's something I want to share, an experience we have here at FUSADES, is that we have, for the last 3 years, we had the communications committee. This is a weekly 1-hour meeting in which participates the president of the foundation, the executive director, and each of the heads of the research departments. And what we do in every meeting is we discuss issues, we discuss our impact in media, what are also the media agenda, what's out there, what opportunities lie out there for our research, and also what risks may involve any issue. Because there's another question that you must ask yourselves in your think tanks is, how deep are you willing to advocate an issue? And you have to have this very clear also within your objectives. Are you going to be an advocate, almost a lobbyist, or are you just going to contribute to the discussion with the research paper? But you have to have this very clear, or you will be also stepping over a boundary that you didn't want to be in the first place. So all these questions have to be asked at the source. And I really recommend that you take this the communications committee idea for your own institutions, because this is also key to relevance within the institution. The importance that communications has to have within your organization. Sometimes we were just relegated to to a second level. Researchers are at the top, and whatever researchers want, that's what we communicate, and it has to be the other way around. We have to work together. And with this communications committee, we have done that, and the president of the foundation is the first one to be there at the meetings, and it has worked. Also, the message. We may have a very high quality content, very high relevance, we have perfect timing, it's profound and meaningful research, but it's boring. And I know many of you have to deal with this, because not everybody speaks our language. As communicators, sometimes we have to become translators, because if public policy and research has to have a very pertinent language. But we're talking to a lot of people that are not economists, that are not professionals in our area, but they're just citizens. Even decision makers, most of our decision makers are not really interested in reading 150 pages. But it's our job to take the most important part of our policy and get their attention. If we're just passed by, all our work is for nothing. So always think that what we produce must capture the attention of people who do not speak your technical language. And this is why it's important to involve communications at the conception and not at birth. And even sometimes our research can be really dense. So sometimes it's enough to make audiences understand why it is important to think about these subjects. Not that they understand our whole research, our whole formulas, or the whole research piece, but even if it's enough, sometimes it's enough to make them understand why it's important to think about this subject. We also have to think more that there's more than one way to tell the story. We have to dissect our work in sound bites and interesting phrases. Right? We promote a lot in social media, Twitter, Facebook, but we have to really empathize with people out there that they don't have time to read all of our research. But if we can just get their attention and start thinking why it's important to deal with this, we're one step ahead. And something I try to talk to our researchers about is, if they're producing a piece, and if my 13-year-old can't understand the relevance, not the whole deal, but the relevance, then I'm in trouble and I have to start again. Because that's the level at what I have to really sometimes bring down our language so we can be relevant to a lot of people, mostly also in our third world countries. If not, then we're just discussing at an elite level, and we're not getting down. And we'll see why it's important to talk to society. Also, the media. I just wanted to post right now a series of questions you have to ask yourself before you start in the communications. First of all, how well do I know my stakeholders' media usage? For example, we had a study with the younger generation in universities, and we found out that they don't watch television anymore, that they don't read papers, they don't read anything that's not digital, and they get all their news from Twitter. So if we're trying to speak to them through papers, we won't do that. Am I using the right media for this audience? Am I getting deleted or spammed? How comprehensible is my language? Is my timing adequate? Am I over or under communicating? Am I having conversations in social media and getting good feedback? And strategically thinking of all of the above. Also in media, it's usual that think tanks talk about presentations, meetings, events, news, and journals. But I encourage you to think about infographics. This is a very, very good instrument that can be used to explain the importance and relevance of our work. And we have used also animated videos, short films. Our researchers have become bloggers. We are very active in social media, but also what we have done is we have become unpredictable. We are trying always to be one step ahead in communications and not always, of course, strengthen what we do with traditional media, but also to be proactive and be one step ahead. When we talk about audiences, we have strategically segmented 4 different ones. First, the decision makers, obviously, then the influencers, then there's media. These 3, I'm sure it's very across the board, but we have really worked with talking to civil society, leadership, associations, initiatives, movements, universities, and the reason why is because decision makers get very nervous when we talk to voters. When we encourage civil society leadership, politicians start to listen, and if we do so in groups, they listen harder. So I really encourage you if we're not really getting a response from decision makers the first time, second time, maybe we want to try social leadership, because that's when they start listening harder. Just to wrap up, because I took longer than I expected. Some special considerations: working groups and networks. Strength in numbers does work. Even also, if you're working with very difficult or delicate issues that may even make you vulnerable in your image or your credibility, work with networks, work with other universities, with other NGOs to push a certain issue, and it works. It has worked for us. Always remember that decision makers are also politicians. You know, they don't have the same set of values that we do. We have to remember about that. And also, what I said is, politicians, they get very nervous when we talk to their voters. That's just society. And as members of society, we have to do this. Also, public policy takes time. Change takes time. And we have to be patient, and we have to plan public policy in the long run and not just immediate. Also, feeding public debate and discussion is also an achievement. Even if we don't get change within the first months or years, even feeding the public debate can be called an achievement. And everything you say and do or don't do communicates. We have to remember that everything communicates. There is the impossibility of not communicating. So even your silence might tell something. Also, as I was telling you, you have to decide before time how far you want to advocate an issue, so as you don't cross that line and sometimes take you to a place you don't want to be. Within an environment. Also, media evolve almost daily. So much our knowledge of it. So you have to keep an eye out for new media, for media usage, and for what the new generation are doing. If you want to be relevant, you want to talk to younger generations. If you keep your communications at an elite level, then you will last. But there are millions of the younger generation that you want to be relevant for. So you have to talk to them. You have to have social media. You have to study their habits, their habitat, and how they consume media. So you can be there present where crucial conversations are happening, and to make what we said at the beginning, to be relevant and transcendent. So I'll stay there, Leandro.
Okay, René, it was great. Your work at FUSADES is really amazing. So thanks so much for sharing your experience. So now I will give Rebecca one more chance, and let's see if we can make it now. If not, we continue with the questions and answers section. Okay? Is everyone hearing well? Great. So let's try with Rebecca again. Okay, Rebecca, so please say something.
Hello.
Please say something.
Hello.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to try and pick up where I left off, which was I was talking to this slide over here. Land reform, the land reform terrain is determined by our history of relocation of indigenous populations, and 87% of land is owned by whites. Where did I get up to? From 1994 onwards, we saw a shift in policy, but the Constitution still enshrined the rights of white landholders, although the government decided to target 30% of land for redistribution. Now, the 30% target is an example of an international organization determining policy, because the direction to just redistribute 30% of the land came from the World Bank, and it wasn't based on research at all. It was just based on what the World Bank thought that the South African population would accept as being the land reform target. Today, 20 years after apartheid ended, only 7.5% of land has been distributed, and about 50% of land reform projects have failed due to a lack of state support. And at the same time, the land reform that has happened, we've seen elite capture. So black politicians have been managing, and black businessmen have been managing to get hands on the land when it was supposed to help alleviate poverty. And then in the last year, the government suddenly decided to reopen the restitution claims, even though a backlog of restitution claims. It decided to reopen them and allow people once again to make new claims. But at the same time, while people felt that this was good strategy, on the other hand, the government proposes to only redistribute land to proven farmers. And at the same time, the government has been cutting the land reform budget. So all of these interact on our ability to communicate and to shift policy. Our policies are pro-poor. We believe that the beneficiaries of land reform need support, and that reform should support subsistence farmers, etc. So in this terrain, it's an extremely complex terrain, and one of the strategies that we've used has been to, we continue to engage with government in the forums that government creates around the reopening of the restitution bill. The political actors have indicated that they're not willing to listen to critical voices in this terrain. We continue to engage with them, but we know that they've closed their ears. So instead, we've also worked with civil society organizations and NGOs to share ideas on responses to the policies. We've used the mainstream media and social media to air our critical views and inform citizens. We've disseminated fact sheets to highlight key issues. And then we've also run some training courses for trade unions and for journalists on the key issues. And then we've engaged with agribusiness and farmers organizations. We've engaged them in debate because they're actually having quite a strong influence on land reform policy at this point, and we want to critique their particular pattern of influencing policy. the terrain is extremely difficult, but we've also been approached by other political parties, and this is one of the key ways that the landscape is shifting, because with this emergence of this new political party on the left of the ANC, we're seeing that younger people and a lot of the poor might be, in the upcoming elections, might be voting for the new political party, and they've taken on board all of our policy recommendations with regard to land reform. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out in the coming elections, because the new political party has put land reform front and center of its policies and its election platform. So land reform is a key issue on the election agenda, and citizens' insistence for pro-poor widespread land reform continues to grow and strengthen. So when we're talking about policy in this very political terrain, we don't just see influencing the main government party as the key way to influence policy. It's also important to engage with the other political parties and see what influence they can get, as well as engaging with civil society organizations. So with the political terrain, we mainly see communications as needing to happen within that web of power that I talked about, and can't just engage the policymakers. You need to engage many actors, as René said in his talk. It makes politicians nervous when you speak to voters, but in South Africa, we've got a situation where the government is actually just listening to the black elite, and they're not really listening to voters, and they're not even seeming that nervous at this point. It seems that the main political party thinks that it can just do whatever it wants and people will keep voting for it because of its anti-apartheid credentials. And it's in the coming election, which is in May, we'll see whether this this feeling of security that the leading party has is valid or not. Thank you.
Okay, Rebecca, I will turn off your voice.
Thanks.
Okay, so thanks, Rebecca. We are glad that you finally could finish your presentations. It was really interesting. So, okay, now it's the time to open the space for participants' questions. I would like to give you a few rules about how I would like you to send your questions through the chat. So, okay. I hope you have taken notes. So please start to send your questions through the chat, and I would like you to indicate at least two things. First, which is your organization? Yes, I can see, everyone can see your name, but I would appreciate if you can share your organizations, followed by your country, the question, and the speaker, the presenter you would like to answer it. So more or less something like this. Okay, so I think it's the more organized way to do it. So I hope it's okay with everyone. So please start to send your questions, and we will share it with speakers. Thanks. Okay, so I will turn off Vanesa's, René, and Rebecca's camera in order to avoid some problems with connection. I will just leave their audios. Okay, so okay, we have a lot of questions. I will searching the first one. Okay, first question is from Nora from Dalia Association in Palestine. She would like to hear from, apologize. Okay, so she asked about the potential role roots. Sorry, her problems. Apologize. Okay. So question from Nora, she wants to know about the potential role of grassroots communities in any aspect of the research and policy process. Okay. Does any of the presenters want to answer this question?
Yes, I can provide some insights. Nora, I think you're raising a very good point, and even though it might not have emerged as an example of types of stakeholders, we all know that grassroots organizations can play a significant role. And in that sense, I think, again, that the answer depends on how you read your political context in terms of the real opportunity and potential of grassroots playing a role there, using evidence and becoming partners in the policy influencing processes. But I would combine the current political assessment with also your organizational identity. You might find out, if you are just reading text, that grassroots organizations may not play a role today. So maybe in the short term, the short-term response would be, let's do, or let's apply other type of strategies. But on the midterm and long term, they might become and play a potential role. I do think that also that depends on the issue, on the topic, and the identity of the organization. So one of your potential policy influence objectives, and I agree with René, you need to have a real objectives there, is to enable and to help these grassroots communities play a part in the research and policy processes. And I see a tendency, even if it's slow and not that formal yet, of policy processes being opened up to other players, such as grassroots communities, because they do have a specific type of knowledge and interest that in certain policy areas are going to play a larger and larger role. So I do think there is a role there, but the scope and the effort that one organization can play in that sense depends on this combination between your political assessment in the short and midterm, but also the overall goal of the organization in terms of having grassroots communities become partners of your work.
Okay, many thanks, Vanesa.
Yes.
Next question is from Vlad Galushko from the Think Tank Fund. He has a question for René. What kind of question, René, do you ask your researchers to encourage strategic thinking about communications before they begin with a research project?
Sure. some of the key questions that they have to ask themselves actually is, first of all, what kind of change or call to action I want to achieve. You know, if I'm writing something and it's public policy, it usually comes with a proposal. And so what are your goals? What are your objectives? And what change you want to see? Also, when do you want this to happen? So you don't frustrate yourself or the organization. And you know, sometimes you're going to have to wait a month, a year, 2 years. But you have to see what kind of change indexes you give yourself so as to be tracing your goals. Also, who are my key audiences? Who are they? Who am I going to talk to? Am I going to talk to my peers? Am I going to talk to government? Am I going to talk to universities? Am I going to be relevant in public opinion? So as to start thinking about the language that I'm going to use, and what kind of communication tools I have at hand. Because as I said before, there's not only one or two ways to transmit or to put across an idea. You have to have at least 4 or 5. Also, who can help me? Who can help me with this issue? Am I going to do this alone, or am I going to do this with other members of civil society or even government or universities? Also, who can stop me? Who is going to be at the other side of this issue, and who is going to try to stop me from reaching my goals? And those are the basic ones. You know, if they start thinking about strategically about this, then what they produce will be according to the type of communications that they're going to have to need to get the message across.
Thanks, René. Now we have a question to Vanesa from CIPPEC from Bangladesh. He wants to know do you think that successful communication of research to policymakers is enough for successful implementation of policies? And what about the potential responses of targeted beneficiaries?
Hi, Gerd. Yes, I'm glad that you bring this to the table, because mainly, usually when we give examples, and most of the communications efforts are focused on other stages of the public policy formulation, where sometimes it feels like we can control more the type of influence we can have, and most of the stories have to do with enriching the debate or having some say in the design of a public policy. But implementation of policy is another very interesting and important and relevant field in our work, and I do think that in that sense, successful communication cannot at all ensure successful implementation of policies, because there are many other factors playing an important role there. You might be communicating very well how the research can inform that implementation. You might be systematizing information and generating evidence so that that implementation is fine-tuned. But if there is a sudden turning in government or in the specific bureaucrats or policymakers you're working with, there's nothing you can do with communications. Yes, but you can anticipate those changes through a good communication. So I do think that specifically in the implementation phase, good communications should be focused on making very sure that you are gathering and using very well the feedback. You have a dialogue there when you're implementing policies with, that is not that usual in other stages. And in referring to this, gathering the feedback and having a very multilateral communications process, they are targeted beneficiaries, again, can play a very important role. And you can play a role there in terms of making sure that they have a voice throughout implementation. That, of course, if the voice or what they are perceiving is negative to the policymaker, then you face another communication challenge, is how to communicate with this to the policymaker and continue having a partnership, or even sometimes deciding that the partnership is not sustainable.
Great, many thanks, Vanessa and CIPPEC. Okay, guys, before the next questions, I have to say that we are almost running out of time, so I will appreciate your patience. I think this is a rich space, so I will ask you to continue with us for 10 minutes more or 15 minutes more. Hope everyone is okay with this. And now it's the turn of Shahira's questions from GDNet in Egypt. It's a questions for René. So how can researchers know their stakeholders' use of media usage? Apart from the survey, are there any tools to suggest?
Thank you, Shahira. What we have used, and it's very good. It's focus groups. We have permanent groups, and we've done now. There's an example of one that we call the analysis group. So what we took is we have taken 3 very sharp university students and 3 very active young professionals, and what we do is every publication that we have, every book that we have, we are going to give it to them, and they're going to analyze it and say what's relevant for them, what tools we need to use to get it across to their peers. If the language is way off, if they don't get, if it's not interesting for them, or what part of it is interesting, and this group functions on every month or twice every month, and this really lets us get a grip on what's out there, because the older generation, they're very predictable. Although some of them use a lot of technology, but it's the younger generation that really change, and sometimes we might be just left alone in a space that we think where we're being listened to, but no. So I really suggest focus groups. They sometimes they can be a little expensive, but they really help you to keep an edge on what's going on and how they are consuming media, when they're doing it, how long, and as I said, that's how we found out that that kids are not reading anymore. They're not reading left to right like in books. They are just they're reading. They don't know a lot about very little. What they do is that they know very little about a lot, because they're learning interconnectedly. So that's something that you have to keep in mind also.
Thanks, René, and thanks, Shakira. Now it's the time of Bomi from Laos, from the National University of Laos. So, new question for Vanessa. Bomi says that normally policymakers in less developed countries place much less in researchers or research results. Do you have any suggestion on how to influence them in those countries?
Thanks, Ken, Bomi, for your question. I see that you're making a question that really has the context as a starting point. And in fact, when I was talking about the guiding principles for policymaking, it's not only the principles that are there, but also what does not happen. So when you're dealing with a context where the culture of using research and evidence to craft policy or make policy decisions is very low, that's probably the main goal for your efforts for a time. And in fact, the fact that you're teaching in a university is a very important space for this. I think there are no blunt answers for this. I have some ideas of what I've seen and read, and I think that build a culture of use of research in this type of countries, it's a big effort. So the main suggestion is to build partnerships. Of course, it would be very difficult standing alone to push for a larger use of research results within a culture that is not used to this. So partnerships, for instance, with universities. I think that public schools and universities where public management is taught is an excellent place to start convincing future policymakers about how evidence and research can contribute to their work. I also think that political parties, think tanks are sometimes good partners. If there are in your country think tanks from political parties, they might be dealing with the same challenge. That many parties do have a think tank, but then they do not really use it. It's just because they need to show that they are thinking about the things, but when decisions are made, most of the work of the think tank is not used. Other research organizations, the think tanks, research centers, universities, as well as potential users. What Nora was saying about grassroots communities. Build partnerships with those who are nowadays convinced on the role and the value of evidence for policy making, or detect those who would be more willing to use it with you, so as to gradually start generating demand and culture that values and shows and demonstrates that research can make a contribution. So these are just some ideas.
Thanks, Vanessa, and thanks, Bomi. Now I would like to do a question for Rebecca. It's a question. So, okay, I was very surprised about how you guys, in PLAAS. Okay, Rebecca, please use headphones. Okay, I will do it through the chat.
Okay, yeah. Can you hear me? Okay. The way that we consider ideology, we very much see our work as entering into a sort of ideological warfare, if you will. So we try and identify the different ideological terrains that exist and that are influencing policy. So the neoliberal ideology of land must be a productive resource, and new farmers can't just be subsistence farmers, they must be businessmen, and that sort of thing is one of the key ideologies that's governing what happens in land reform at the moment. At the same time, there's an ideology of the historical struggle, the wish for indigenous populations to get their land back. So when we look at the specifics of the different dynamics that are going on, and we very much see that those ideologies are overarching the policy. So so power resides in those ideologies, and there's a political hegemony happening in which your particular view or your research might not have traction depending on which ideological, where it fits in the ideology. So we try and craft our messages in a way that addresses these different ideologies, either to critique those ideologies or to agree with them or to enhance the ideology. So if the ideology is about returning the land to the indigenous populations who had their land taken away before, then that's very much it's a very emotive kind of thing. So we try and bring a kind of rational analysis to how this can happen, rather than just focusing on the emotive. It's quite complicated. I don't know if I've answered your question satisfactorily.
Thanks, Rebecca. So, okay, guys, I think we can share the last 3 or 4 questions from Radomir from Radomir's to the last question of CIPPEC. I think it's okay with that. We are running out of time, and let's try to close this webinar with 3 final questions. So Radomir asks, Radomir is from the Belgrade Centers for Security Policy in Serbia. It's a question for René. Do you see general public as target group for think tanks? Do you engage citizens at any level other than informing the media? So, René, please go ahead with your answer.
Thank you, Radomir. And absolutely, general public and citizens are key to public policy engagement, because, as I said before, it's a leadership aspect also, because think tanks they fill a role as leaders within the social society. I mean the civil society, and we have to also encourage the leadership within the civil society so that they can also become part of changes within this policy. And also because politicians, as I said, they get very nervous when we talk to their voters. Answering also Adi's question about how to achieve successful advocacy in societies where politicians are not interested in what you say unless it's pre-election. And what we have to do is be relevant all the time. And what we do this is we penetrate universities. We talk to civil society leadership, and as members of civil society, I mean, our business is in public policy, but we are still members of civil society, and we have a leadership role in there, and it's very important to keep it and to work it, because that's what gives you relevance and credibility, and also more than informing through media, there's a lot of events and presence and going into universities and working with them, that can really help. So it's very important at all the time, and also talking directly to civil society.
Great, thanks, René. So next question is from Leni in Indonesia, from the National Health Institute of Research and Development. She says that health researcher in her country is very seldom use social media as the powerful source of communication in communicating the health research result and message. Maybe because they see research communication as a serious or boring matter. She asks what should they do and how can they learn and unlearn. Has anyone of the presenters want to answer this question?
I can do this.
Okay, René, go ahead.
It's not easy. It's not easy because it can be very dense, like I said, and the language can be very difficult to talk to, in such a very ample and very easygoing room like social media. But that's why I said we have to be a little bit creative. We have to dissect what's interesting about our work just to get their attention. What we do is we post in our site the work. It has like an analysis or a paper or even books. But what we do is we extract out of them sound bites, and we use a lot of images because now we're more visual than ever. So if you take an idea, a main idea, and use it within a picture in Facebook, or just a title, a little subtitle in Twitter, just to get their attention and redirect them to where you have located the whole research paper, it works. It has worked before. And also we use video. Video is a very, very good language to promote the importance of what you have written or what you have researched, and to get their attention. That's the key. Just grab their attention through smaller pieces to make them go to the bigger piece.
René, and thanks, Lenny. Now is the time of Ali's question from the Center for Policy and Governance in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The question is how to achieve successful advocacy in societies with policymakers that are not interested in communicating with civil society other than pre-election period. So maybe Vanesa or Rebecca can answer this question.
I can. Rebecca, would you rather do it? I can do it, but maybe you want to participate.
Okay, maybe Vanesa, you can continue because last question is for Rebecca. So go ahead, please.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Yes. Again, I think that aligned with what René was saying about using reaching the public in general. I think that one possible way to work with this, I wouldn't say it's successful advocacy for sure, but to strengthen advocacy efforts would be to kind of enlarge what we consider a civil society, and within that very large and heterogeneous sector, detect who there would have a relevant source, a resource that could play a role for policymakers. It could be, for instance, I'm just thinking aloud, but it could be, why don't you build a campaign with famous people who have social legitimacy to support a certain course or idea. This is a typical thing that has worked with other type of CSOs, but why would not a relevant person, a famous person, support something that emerges from research? So what I think what we need there to do is, I agree, and most of the time civil society, and we've heard many colleagues saying so in this debate, and that's why I think we should talk more about this. It's very difficult to grab policymakers' attention, and in some cases, even though you are partnering with others, to make them real nervous. So there, I think we have to find out who are within civil society, the type of actors that could really play a more important role, be it like a business sector, it can be a union, or of course a mix of this. And this also has to do with building a culture, as I was saying, within policymaking, building a culture of use and valuing research. It's also building a culture of getting engaged in public policies with others within civil society. There's work to do on both sides.
Thanks, Vanessa. So last question is for Rebecca. Please try to be brief in your answer. It is from Sid again, and he says, Rebecca, that in your presentation you mentioned that most of the land reform policies failed due to non-cooperation from government. Is it the issue of sustainability of policies, change of government, change of policies? So, okay, Rebecca.
Hi. The failure of the policies are to do with the lack of post-settlement support. So once government handed land over to poor communities, it didn't provide them with farming inputs, it didn't provide them with fertilizer, with tractors, with equipment, with irrigation systems and so on. So people couldn't get their farms off the ground. And that's one of the key messages that we've been trying to communicate. But we don't see just communicating with government as being effective. It has actually failed entirely because the government is very much driven by a neoliberal policy where people have to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. So we've tried to engage in different formats. I think this is the key. You can't just engage with policymakers. All over the world, policymakers do not listen unless you've got other partners who you're working with who are putting the same message across that you are. So we very much concentrated on working with civil society, building the debate on social media, letting people know on social media how to engage with government and what are the key issues to engage with government, and then also working with, as I said, undertaking debates with business role players to shift their focus as well. So the message is not necessarily immediately taken up by government, but by strengthening the message with other people and having the message be echoed by other people and other role players. That is how you ultimately influence policy. And I think that our ability to influence other political parties will come to play out post-election, because if those political parties come from nowhere like they have and gain political power, then the government will be more inclined to listen to those people who support the new political party. So it's very much a dynamic, changing situation, and you have to identify opportunities in that situation. Look at which different role players have power at particular points in time and try and engage with those role players. This is especially so when you find that the government is not listening. You need to bring about listening amongst all the other role players. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thanks everyone. It's a time to close the webinar. Apologize for running out of time. Unfortunately, we have a few problems with connection. It is our first experience organizing a webinar, so we will try to improve it for next time. So it has been a pleasure for me to facilitate this webinar. I really enjoyed it. Thanks everyone for joining us. I hope you have learned a lot, as I personally did. Special thanks to Vanesa, René and Rebecca for their participations and for GDNet support. I just want to say that this webinar is like the first activity that we want to do in terms of fostering the research communications debate. We have developed a course, an online course on research communications It's a joint initiative between CIPPEC and Politics and Ideas, and probably we will deliver it in a couple of months. We are trying to find the right moment, so we will receive our news and hope you can join us to the next online course on research communications. The last thing I want to say is that you will receive a brief email with a survey, so I would appreciate if you can answer it as soon as possible, so we have your input to improve the webinar for next time. So again, thanks everyone for your participation, thanks to the presenters, and let's keep in touch and have a nice day and a nice evening. Bye.
Muchas gracias por todo, Leandro.
Thanks, René. Thanks, everyone. Gracias. No,